Our presenter tonight is Jacque Rupp. Okay, so Jacque Rupp is a documentary and fine art photographer based in the San Francisco Bay Area. A visual storyteller, Rupp uses the camera to challenge and question, offering a unique perspective on the world around us. In her most recent work, Rupp focuses on womanhood, using herself and experiences. As the subject matter, Rupp ventures off into the imagined, exploring issues of identity and purpose. Rupp received an MBA from Santa Clara University and later worked as an executive in Silicon Valley. Building on her lifelong passion for the visual arts, Rupp studied photography at Stanford University, Los Angeles Center of Photography, and Santa Fe workshops. She serves on the board of the Western Collective, a nonprofit organization dedicated to expanding student access to photography. Meet Jacque Rupp. Take it away.
One thing you did mention too is I'm very active in the film community, and I work up with the Stanford United Nations Film Festival as well. And that really, there's a big tie with that into my photography. And that's all documentary films. All right, thank you. It's thrilled to be here tonight. I came to a meeting here, I think it was probably 5 years ago. It's a while ago. I was very impressed by the town. I remember Bob Sadler was presenting at the time, but I live on the other side of the hill, so kind of the logistics of coming back and forth were a bit challenging, but I did come to a couple meetings, so I was thrilled when Mark invited me to come tonight. So I was going to give a little bit of background, and feel free to ask questions as a casual person, on Zoom or in person. Feel free. It works. Okay, so first I'm going to give a little bit.
What's that surprise?
I know, I'm like, first of all, no checking it there. So watch that I'm going to keep checking up there. Okay, here I am. I was a highly inquisitive child, always on the move and always asking why. I grew up in the Northeast in a small family, and we moved regularly because my dad worked for a company with the initials I've been moved. So we literally moved every year. And I would always get stumped on the question when somebody would ask, where's your home? Because it changed regularly. And I share this because I think it's really important with my art, is because I'm always have themes about loss and that need for connection in my work. It wasn't that bad. Okay, so I idolized my father, and he played a huge role in who I would become as a person and as an artist. Educated as an industrial engineer and a psychologist, he was highly accomplished in both the arts and the sciences. He was brilliant, adventurous, funny, and I absolutely adored him. And I would savor our late night conversations, analyzing world events and hearing about his exotic travels. His universe was so much bigger than mine, and I wanted that in my future. But looking back, I see what was most impactful was his belief in women. He encouraged all the women in his life to invest in themselves, be able to take care of themselves, be adventurous. He was an advocate. He saw no ceiling, no boundaries. Themes around female representation will show up throughout my work. But being a child of Depression-era parents, he also had his demons. And our relationship was a complicated one, especially when alcohol came into play later in life. And I believe I'm drawn to the more dramatic and emotionally charged subjects in my art because of this. My interest in psychology and searching for a deeper understanding of human behavior was planted at a very young age. So we lived in Woodstock when I was in my teens, and so I don't know if you guys have heard of it. I'm sure you have. It was an artist colony in upstate New York in the Catskill Mountains. And I was old enough to know it was happening, but not old enough to go. But I was surrounded by musicians and artists and in a community that valued the arts at a young age. And it was also here in high school where I took my first darkening classes. And I immediately fell in love with the entire process, both the capturing and the processing of the images. The magic of watching a photograph begin to appear in the developer tray, the smell of the fixer, and the sheer pleasure of creating art. I couldn't draw, so I was drawn to the camera because I love art, I love creativity, but it definitely started back at this time. So we moved to California shortly after graduating from college when I realized that you don't have to live in the snow because I was in upstate New York. I came to visit, my father had been transferred out here and I came to visit and I was like, I am not going back. So as soon as I graduated, I moved to California, and I immediately got a job in the tech world, and it was a crazy time back then. This is in the late 70s, early 80s. It was insane. We were changing the world. I'm sure many of you in this room were part of it. But I found my people and I found my home. And I also would be the first woman in many executive roles over the years. And eventually, while working at Apple, was surrounded by incredibly talented and creative people. Again, in a world where the arts and the sciences come together. And again, that's very thematic, I think, in my life. I'm drawn to both. Where both were valued. And I left the tech world with those values. And again, over dinner, I think I heard some other people, kind of similar conversation. I would spend hours as a child leafing through our stacks of National Geographic magazines. And I was fascinated by all the people and the places and the allure of just these exotic places. And I'm sure that this contributed to my sense of adventure and curiosity about seeing the world. It also gave me a visual language that I would tap into later in life. My favorite, of course, is Steve McCurry on the left. And I expanded this visual vocabulary through my passion for cinema and the moving image, enthralled by the drama intensity of Hitchcock films, The Birds, Vertigo. I still get a visceral reaction when I think of them. And of course, the many James Bond films I watched as a child with my dad, mesmerized by the colors, the action, and the intensity. Then later, the psychological noir crime films like David Lynch's Mulholland Drive and Blue Velvet came into play, and other classics like Pulp Fiction and Body Heat. Both the femme fatale and the dramatic cinematography captivated my mind and took me to a place of mystery and intrigue. I'm watching one now. I don't know if anybody's watching Ripley. The cinematography in that movie, just if you gotta watch it. The cinematography is out. It's in black and white, but that just for that, without sound, is amazing. I studied many photographers and have taken many workshops, and I'm fortunate that many fellow students and teachers that I could call friends today. But scanning through it now, I realize that kind of the biggest standouts that in my work is, for me, that I tap into would be Dorothea Lange, who showed us how powerful one single image could be. Like Migrant Mother, still get the chills. Still haunts me today. Then there are more contemporaries like Steve McCurry and Sebastian Salgado, who show us everyday people in faraway places, and often in very challenging situations, yet always with such dignity and grace. They care, so we care. They connect, so we connect. And then more personally from workshops, people like Sig Harvey and her dramatic use of color, Eleanor Carucci and an honest and often raw portrayal of herself and her family, and Jennifer McClure with her use of self-portraiture to make sense of a very difficult time in her life. They're all storytellers. I'm a storyteller. Now I'll share more current work. I'll take you through kind of a few different transitions in my work, and you'll see that I start kind of far away. And as over the years, I get much closer and closer and much more personal. But regardless, it's always about people. So after my kids went off to college and I left the tech world, I had the opportunity to explore the cultures in earnest. I had time. And the more remote and the more exotic, the more adventurous, I was all in. It fed my curiosity and it challenged me to grow. And I realized quickly that exploring places with a camera, serious camera in hand, gave me a sense of responsibility. It challenged me, it opened doors, but it gave me a reason for being there. But really that sense of responsibility of, I have this opportunity, I better make it good. I want to honor this person, and so I took it very seriously. And while doing that, I would look for stories. I look for stories about people, and usually it was on the fray. It was everyday people, everyday lives, and I love connecting with people. and for situations that, just struck my curiosity. So I would, dig in, go into people's homes and just start up conversations. So the first one, India has always held, a special place in my heart. And I think it's that sense of spirit and that sense of calm. And I love this image because it's the overcrowded streets in Delhi. It's absolute chaos, but yet there's this sense of balance. There's almost a dance going on. They know how to live in that chaos. And it's also, for me personally, it's a culture that accepts death as part of living. And for me, I found that very comforting. The first time I went, my husband was very ill and it was a really tough time. But being in India, there was such a shift because it was accepting. It was so welcoming. It was so very therapeutic, I guess. And here's another from India. This is a more recent one. And this is when I went to Kumela. It was I think it was in 2019 on the other side of COVID. I don't know if you're familiar with Kumela, but it's like 130, it's the biggest pilgrimage, Hindu pilgrimage that exists in the world. I think it's the largest human gathering of people. And the year I went, there were 135 million people that attended. And I think it's over 45 days. And I think the day I was there were like 40 million people. It was crazy. But again, it was organized chaos. We did have to worry about stampedes and things just because the people all moving in a certain direction. There was never any fear of anything, nobody trying to hurt you or anything, but it was, there were crowds. But this is a priest that's coming out of the Ganges River after a spiritual cleansing. This I took, this was during a holy festival in India. This was earlier on. And I spotted this character and I spent an hour kind of following him around just to try to capture that right moment to show his spirit. And he's all covered in pink because it's holy, but it was just really special. And here are just a couple of boys. This was during a parade. I believe they were in the parade. And I don't know, just with eye contact, started playing with them, into a playful mood and was able to capture this. And I just think it's such a universal thing about kids. It could be from anywhere, but I love the connection. And here, this is in northern India, in Amritsar. And I just love that kind of that juxtaposition of technology and, old religion. But she's on her iPhone at the Golden Triangle, reading her prayers on the iPhone. It also gave good light. Exploring villages along the Chinwin River early one morning. This is their local taxi. And this is the other thing about travel. I know a lot of you guys travel, but it's interesting. Like right now, you can't go there anymore. I think I went there, I don't know, it was 8 or 9 years ago. It's not because of, the chaos there.
This is Myanmar, right?
It's in Myanmar, and it's not as open as it was, or as easy. I went during very easy time. But I'm glad I did. And I think that's kind of a lesson for all of us in travel. If it's open, go for it, because things change. This one was in Myanmar as well. And we were camping in this really rugged boat. And we got up early one morning, and it was like 4 or 5 in the morning. We just wandered onto the shore and we started walking. We were all photographers. And all of a sudden we stumbled on this scene. And it's a ritual they do, I think twice a year, and we happened to catch one. It just like the fog lifted and this happened in front of us. It was just crazy. And I think that's, kind of the magic of photography. And if we didn't have our cameras, we probably wouldn't have gone exploring, but this is what we stumbled into. This is in Vietnam, and we spent time with children, with an organization, with kids that had been affected, or families that had been affected by Agent Orange. And we spent a day or two with them, and then we gave them images that they used in their marketing. So I love when people can use our images. But this was I just thought this was such a touching, precious moment. I spent all day with them. This is more recent. This was down in Colombia. during the Easter festivals a couple years ago. And I'm always fascinated by religion, kind of a spirituality in different cultures and the way they celebrate. And I think the other thing too, when I went to Colombia, everybody's like, you're crazy. You know, Colombia is dangerous. You can't go. And I think it's so true when we do travel that so much of that's a misnomer, or it was about a time, you know, past, or it was an isolated town or situation. But I think it's really important when we travel is to bring stories and images back that show a more balanced view. And again, that goes back for me anyway, that sense of responsibility. I love getting in the middle of things. I got in the middle of the parade. But the people were great in Colombia. And then the kids, you know, playing on the ocean. And again, kind of a universal theme. But I've learned so much from exploring and traveling. And again, I think it's really important to bring those stories back. So that's my world traveling, just a sense of some of the things that I was doing with that. And then I started this project. It was after I left the corporate world. I wanted my photography to have more meaning, to have an impact. And it was right around the time when the whole, I don't want to be political, but it was when there was such an uprise about immigration. You know, all the murderers and rapists are flooding our borders and all that, which I guess is still in the headlines today, unfortunately. But I realized that I live here, you know, in the Bay Area and drive by the farms all the time. And I really had never gotten out, spent time. I go to other countries, but here I am in my own country and I don't know it. So I started photographing farm workers. And this became my project, The Unseen. So I began visiting the fields. I worked with a friend of mine, Mark Tishman. I don't know if anybody knows Mark. He just has that immigration book he just released. I actually helped him on that book. We did a lot of those portraits down there. But we got involved with some of the nonprofits down there as well, which gave us access. But again, we gave images back, so because I think it's important to give back. So we spent a lot of time in the fields, just building relationships, photographing. And really what we learned quickly is the dirty little secret in agriculture, which is that, you know, they don't want to be photographed for fear of being deported. And we don't want to photograph. We don't want to photograph. We just kind of look the other way. We know it's kind of under the table what's happening, but we need the food, we need the labor. So we kind of look the other way. So that's why I call the project The Unseen. It's kind of this mutual pact that we have with each other in a mutual dependency. What I found were incredibly hardworking people like Miguel, who shares the same hopes and dreams that we all have, to live in a safe environment, to provide for his family. For him, was, you know, back in Mexico, and a lot of pride in what they're doing. And I was especially interested in the women. And here's a woman, Maria, that I became friends with. And she moved to the country, I think, when she was 16. She started out picking strawberries, you know, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. But she eventually worked her way up and actually, with the help of the nonprofits around here, was able to lease a farm and, you know, become the farmer. So she has a farm down in San Juan Bautista area. And it's in all of these nonprofits, at least that I dealt with, it's all organic farming. And we also helped them during COVID, where we worked with them to set up a direct distribution back into the Bay Area for, you know, the CSA boxes. And they actually get all the money that they sell, which was great, because with all the middlemen, I don't know the numbers, but they were, prior to that, they're getting maybe 30% of what, you know, the consumer pays, where this way it was going directly to them. And it helped us, because in the beginning, we were all afraid we couldn't get food at the beginning of COVID. And it just kind of opened up this channel that was a real benefit on both sides. And that still exists today. The other thing I saw is how important family is there. And here is Maria in the background, but here's her daughter in the front, Angelica, who works a day job at a desk, but then nights and weekends is, on the farm helping mom. But I think a lot of that gets lost, at least in other family situations that I see. But there's a very tight family, which is really important. Here's Maria working late in the night, harvesting crops for the next day. They're so hardworking. And there's so many things that can go wrong, the weather, the economy, there's so many things that are dependent. They can, plan everything. And then, it rains really hard and everything's lost. The fires, the heat. Pardon?
What is the light?
She had a spotlight on. She was going out to get stuff. It was dark and she was still working. So she just had a headlamp on her head. Of course, I saw her coming from the field with that headlamp. I was down on the ground. But yeah. Here's another farmer, Berta. And thanks again to the same nonprofit. She actually owns her own farm and she bought a couple houses and her kids will have homes as well. She's the second generation from that family. Pardon?
What is the name of the nonprofit?
So I worked with Kitchen Table Advisor. That was one, and then Alba is another one. And they're both down in Salinas. Yeah, and they're great because they educate, they help, and they really, help them from a business perspective. And they stay with them for like 4 or 5 years, and they're constantly cycling through.
Another question.
Sure.
Were you interacting with these folks in Spanish, in English?
So that was a problem. So when we started it, we actually had a woman from Coke Farms that was bilingual. And so she would go out with us, she'd introduce us to people, and she would translate, which was really helpful. So we had that. But then you'd still kind of drift off. And even though I don't speak Spanish, I have some words and they're not necessarily speaking English, but they have words, we could still communicate. But to get the really good stories or to get that way, we needed that. But also the nonprofit would come in too. So if I would meet them in the field and I'd interview and then they would help and I'd record things. But that definitely, that language was a challenge. So one of the biggest rewards I had was with Berta's family, is that she invited me to her daughter's quinceanera. And so I was there at 6 a.m. At the house with all the women and spent all day with them. And you speak about the language barrier. That was fine with these generations, but I ended up sitting at the head table next to Berta, who doesn't speak one word of English. So the whole dinner, there was all this translation going, but it was such an honor. I mean, it was such a privilege. And here she is. They call her Princess, and you can see why. And then at the end of it, I made a book and gave it to her as a gift after. So here's another thing that happens is that here are the 4 generations of women. And so the original mom, the mom on the left, was the first one to come over. And then shortly thereafter brought her daughter, who's Berta, the second one over. And they, both farming. But then what happens is typical that next generation, the third one over, has a desk job, has no aspirations to be involved with farming at all at this point, and her daughter, the one on the right, as well. So the good thing is that they've been able to buy farms and houses, and they're doing well, and they're educated, which is great. But it just really points out how we need to backfill with immigration, otherwise we don't have the labor. Okay, then the next thing, I'm going to continue on this journey, and this is a project that I actually turned into a book, and I started at the beginning of COVID, and it was when we were all at home, and I photographed people. And the only person I had to photograph was myself, and my partner David, and I just started playing with things, and I started doing self-portraiture. I'd never done self-portraiture, but again, that was the only way I could get a subject. It was out of necessity. And I was taking some workshops online too, and took a couple like self-portraiture, like with Eleanor Carucci and with Jennifer McClure. And I realized as I started photographing that for it to be good, to have a really good story, it has to be real. It has to be unique. You've got to be brave, and it has to be about what's unique to your life and what you want to say. And again, this is back to storytelling. So I began this project, and I worked on it for a few years, but started at the beginning of COVID. So it's called The Red Purse, and it's a story of grief and desire. It's a juxtaposition between the two. And grief is a very liminal time. You're not who you were, and you've not yet become who you will be. Very confusing, and everything felt so surreal. I forgot to tell you the backstory. I became a young widow. So in my 40s, I became a widow. And so for me, I felt that was somewhat of a unique story. And that was a story I wanted to dig into more at that point in time. So that's what this project's about. It's my story. I encourage you really to think about it in a more universal way, because it's really about loss and rebuilding. And it's really about reimagining in order to rebuild. So I titled it The Red Purse because I acquired this purse shortly after he died. And I had gone to a fundraiser or whatever. It was sitting on a table, and it was an auction, silent auction. I saw this purse, which is extravagant, totally out of character for me, and I had to have it. So I kind of stalked it, and I ended up winning. And so I had it, but it wasn't anything I would use. And I see your red purse over there. So it wasn't anything that I would use, but I put it on my dresser, and it sat there for years. And I realized over time through this project, it really kind of represented the desires of what I needed as a woman to move on, to be whole again. The project, it's part fiction, it's part nonfiction. I went through a lot of old journals. We interviewed widows, widowers, people going through loss, different cultures. And not just about death, but also divorce. But really, when you lose your identity, like you wake up, you're not married the next day, or I wasn't a wife the next day. I mean, so I think it's those kind of changes. I think ageism is another one it's more subtle. It happens over time, but again, you're not who you were. So that is what this project is about. And essentially, I look at it as it's really a movie in book form. And I have copies of the book over here. And you'll see it's dark, it's moody, it's scary at times. And there's all this sense of the femme fatale and this kind of exploration and moving on. So I'm going to share some images from the book. There are a lot more in the book, but I'll just share a handful and give a sense of it. So I wanted to start off with honoring his death, or honoring grief and sadness. So I definitely had that, but there was also this sense of impatience to move on. I felt raw and exposed. But it was reassuring later when I would talk to other people going through something similar. That's how they felt too. They were the same exact words they used. So it was important to kick off the project that way. Yet I was still very alive, but I wanted what I had lost. Young widows have no peers. I learned that. There are very few role models. There are very few resources. I would go to things. I didn't fit in anyway. The average age of a widow is 59. I was in my mid 40s, and widowhood's it's full of sadness. It's heavy, and our culture doesn't like to deal with sadness or heaviness. We do for a little bit, but it's uncomfortable. We want to move on. And I knew that I was also a mother of 2 boys, and I knew that I didn't want to do widowhood in a conventional way. I didn't want to live under a shroud. I did not want the kids to live under a shroud. And what I learned from my husband was that life is a present. It's precious. And so I wanted to keep living. And I think this is just kind of a contemplative image, but it's also somewhat a sense of escapism. I love going places. I love traveling or going to places where people didn't know that I had gone through what I had gone through. They didn't look at me that way. They didn't look at me different. So it was nice to get a breather and get out of my community, even though the community was very supportive. But I found comfort, with that sense of anonymity, especially in an urban environment. This was in San Francisco. But I also felt very feminine. I was sexual, which was so confusing. I was a mother of 2 boys. It was embarrassing. It was shameful. And shame is such a powerful negative emotion. And I struggled with that. And this is a page from the book. What I did is I put kind of guideposts throughout the book that give hints at what I'm trying to say along it. Some hints, but I don't want to say too much because I want people to be able to immerse themselves in it as well and get their own story out of it. But this is an example, and I thought it was important to set the stage, about the purse. And it says, first date, silent auction. She eyes the red purse. Feminine, sexy, evocative. She's desperate to have it. She bids, she hovers, it's hers. Which is how I got the purse. And I also found that when I out in the world, that everything was so different. I felt alone. And even when I was with people, even like here, I was with good friends, but it was just this lack of connection and it's just so different. So very, very lonely, even when you're around people. So I wanted to capture that. And my identity changed immediately. I remember waking up the next morning, and I think I just referred to that, but it's like, I'm not a wife anymore. I'm not this, I'm not that. And I had trouble thinking of myself as a widow, and I did not want to use that. I didn't want to be part of that club. I did not want to use that term because of my connotations, what I felt that meant. I wanted to be different, do it differently. And there was, this image is really about a sense of a loss of innocence. It's actually a doll from my childhood that I have carried with me for years. And one of the three things that I've taken forward, Jackie actually took a picture of this. It was important for me to get this into the project some way. But again, to me here, it was just this loss of innocence and just being so unprepared. I looked for answers. Couldn't focus. I couldn't read for years. I literally couldn't read a book for 5 years. There was nobody really to talk to or relate to, so I would just immerse myself in films. And films that were different than when I was before this happened, just kind of, just experimentation in films. Just everything was different, and everything I did had to be different. And I love the edginess of noir. I always have, I still do. But I think it's just, again, it's that scary, it's that extremism. And there's probably a touch voyeuristic as well. Like I was kind of watching. I wasn't living it, I was watching. And I knew I had to be strong for myself, as well as my boys. I had to accept what happened. I had no choice, but I also didn't want to forfeit my life either, especially because I had to be a strong role model for my kids. So soon I began going out into the world as a single woman, and this is after 25 years, and you just like, would I be attractive? I'm so much older now. I have a lived-in body. I began to embrace that change, on so many levels. What am I supposed to do? It's a different world than when I was younger. And, I have a lot of crazy, funny stories that way, thinking about things that you think you should be doing. But I just wanted to give a sense of that here. But I was creating a new world, and it would be one that I would eventually move towards. And it was frightening, it was scary. And again, this is, the noir, the red lighting. I love this alley. It doesn't exist anymore. Another thing about photography, you can't go back and photograph something. I tried, it's all gone. It's right next to the Leica store in San Francisco. It's gone. But it was so amazing. I love the mural on the side. And there was always this sense of feeling like you're on stage. Everybody's watching you. And I did a lot of images on stages. Actually, this was at Cherry Chase, and Jackie we did a session there as well. But I had to get something in the book about being that. And in that vulnerability, people are looking, nobody knows what to say, can't make eye contact. And I insisted on, experimenting, being open, trying new things. And again, a lot of this they're not necessarily things I did. A lot of it's fantasy, and it's, dreaming, it's thinking about things, it's learning. Some's real, but a lot of it's fantasy. But again, I needed to embrace that everything was different and accept that. And I also knew, I know now that was all part of the process. And I think anytime going through a loss for all of us, that's a big part of the process. And I was, yeah, it was really like creating a film. So I was always on the lookout for sets and for locations and time of day and lighting. One of my favorites is that I go down to Carmel a lot, and I love to photograph inside like hotels and things like that, just looking for sets and lighting. So 3 PM on a Sunday, they're cleaning all the hotel rooms. So you can drive from one to the next and just keep. So I would scope places, just looking for where I could photograph or create a scene or a story. But it was fun because it really was like doing a movie. And I would also carry my bag of costumes and cameras and tripods because it's self-portraiture on most of it. So I'd be ready if I hit the right lighting or I hit the right time or whatever, that I could, do it then if I was lucky enough or come back. And I also was very fortunate. I had some really good close friends that helped me at times click. I would set it up, but they would help me click. There's another example of a vignette. And again, they're just kind of teasers to add. I call them my Nora Ephron moments. She leaves at 3 a.m., waiting by the valet stand, quite disheveled. She recognizes the attendant. He smiles at her. He knows she slinks into the car. And I didn't do it. But I have to say, I was presenting at Foothill, and there was a woman there during that presentation that had been to that hotel. Because I know that hotel. Because I used to work at Nordstrom's, and we used to go over to that hotel. I was like, really? I've never been in a hotel, but good for you. So anyway. So I began taking risks, dating, had new attractions, large, again, I wanted a relationship. I wanted what I lost. But then with it, I felt like I was having an affair on my husband, which is ridiculous because he wasn't alive. But there was really, yeah, there was this constant pull. And metaphors were really important. And again, this kind of comes back to Hitchcock. I love staircases. He has staircases in every one of his films, and it's all about transition, thresholds. And it symbolizes a journey, it's a decision. So it was important for me to have that in the book. And then on the left, it's just really, you're two different people. It's a very liminal time. You're not who you were, and you're not yet who you're going to become. It's that in-between time. And then this, you felt so awkward. There were so many firsts, but the whole thing was so awkward. And it was important for me to capture that in this book. And I hope that picture looks awkward to you. It does to me. Room 224. Pardon? Does it look awkward?
Yeah.
But it was really important to get that feeling. And again, it's sprinkled with vignettes. I won't read this one. But nothing straightforward. And the thing I found then is people don't want to talk. And I want my project, and I've actually involved in a lot of grief organizations, and is for people to talk about the things that we don't talk about, because it's important. And a lot of times I'll give a presentation, at the end, somebody will come up to me later, male or female, and they want to talk. And I think there's just this whole area, especially in our society, our culture, where people are afraid to talk. And here's, to me, just that sense, the suitcase was important. It's that sense of time travel and his closet. And again, time. There's this time, everything's so surreal, it's unreal. It was important to capture that here. But it was also, and I've always an optimist and very hopeful. I'm older and I'm wiser now, and wizened over that time frame and knew I had choices. So I started to take control. But I also knew, it wasn't linear. It had to keep going out, had to continue to take risks, had to continue to be vulnerable. And it was that back and forth, that push and pull, which is probably true as we grow as humans. I was also obsessed with Marilyn Monroe. And I think it was because I don't know why I started reading all the books about her, and I know it was because it was such a tragic young figure. And it was important for me to pull that into the project. This isn't it, but I even visited Helena Drive where she committed suicide, where she died. But again, she was bright, and just, very tragic life. So the questioning never went away. Still doesn't. It's still a little bit, still part of me, but definitely it's changed, the weight has shifted. But still, there's always that sense of vulnerability. But it definitely has retreated much more into the shadows. And just gradually became comfortable with it. And again, a vignette, I'm not going to read it, but just much more comfortable over time. And eventually I learned that grieving and living were not mutually exclusive. I could do both. Things are very different today, and I know they will never be the same, and I can appreciate both. And I know that I was doing exactly what I was supposed to have been doing, and it was all part of the journey. So the red purse represents the elusive object of desire. It's about resiliency and doing what I needed as a woman to rebuild. Red is both passionate and demonic, how apropos. That's how I end the book. And then three people three of my contributors are, one was Eleanor Carucci, and I actually have a conversation in the book with her. I don't know if you're familiar with Eleanor, but she's based out of, Mark saying yes, she's based out of New York. She does a lot like the New Yorker. She just came out with a book about Ruth Bader Ginsburg's collars and just released that. But she's done self-portraiture for years and years. And I met her, a few years ago, and there's an interesting conversation in there about self-portraiture for sure. It's like, why do people do self-portraiture, and how you can learn, with the camera, you can learn. And it's not because, first I thought, oh gosh, sister, why are you doing that? Well, I was doing it because I was the only person I could photograph. But I would try to use models and it didn't work. It has to be you. It has to be your emotion, your story that you're trying to capture. So I learned a lot from her, but there's a really interesting conversation in the book with her. And then Jason Langer was another person that helped me, and Joster, who you guys all know. But it was nice getting different perspectives. Jason's a Buddhist, so that having one, the male perspective, but also that spiritual perspective as well was really helpful. So that's my book. I've got it over here. You're welcome to take a look at it. It's been a labor of love, and I'm happy to answer, any questions. And I don't know if it's what you expected about tonight, but it's interesting as an artist to put something out personal, because I've never done that before. That's it's different when you're just showing photographers and you're kind of building a body of work. That's different. You've got a community that understands what you're trying to do, and you kind of build with it. But then you take it and you put something this personal out to the world. It's different. I mean, it's been great doing it, but it's definitely been a learning curve.
So first, thank you. That's a fabulous story and a fabulous book. So everybody, it's not either here or online.
Sure. Yeah, I've got cards here. Sure. Question.
So
how do you do this?
Late getting into this.
Did I talk too long?
Stuff we had to do. So let's do 5 minutes or so, 5 or 6 minutes of Q&A. So who's got a question? Shall we? Go ahead, Chelsea.
Thanks. A number of those pictures were not taken by you. and you have this person on YouTube, she took some of those intimate scenes and photos.
No, most of them I took.
And so you put on
I put a timer, I had a tripod and I had a timer on and I would shoot like 50 images because you never knew how the light was going to hit. And I would go back and forth. So it was, yeah, I had a couple of times, like the one in the ocean with the bathing cap. I had a friend because I couldn't use a timer that somebody helped me with. But in general, I did it. It was all with tripod and timers and yeah.
Very curious, the one with the guy sitting on the side of the bed and you're over there. Seems like the.
It was. It was supposed to be awkward. Fortunately, I know the guy. We've been together for 20 years now. I was like, David, sit there. The light's perfect. But it was that sense of awkward. But there was that sense, what have they done or have they done? It doesn't, just, yeah, it was awkward. And it's almost like you're cheating on somebody. You're not, but the whole thing is just awkward. So thank you for picking up awkward.
You also had the camera very high,
Yeah.
a big tripod.
Yeah. Yeah. That was on a tripod. I did. Yeah.
Your exposures were very dark and moody. Is that all shot in camera or is that done in both?
More in camera. I tend to do it more in camera, but I wanted consistency. And again, I wanted that noir feeling. So I would drop it some in Lightroom. So a combination, but it was always that dark. I was always searching for the high contrast, dark moodiness.
And then when Mike, you have
And it was, pardon?
the bread in that, the whole thing was red. Was that a filter or was that the natural red light?
That was natural. I saw that alleyway, red lights. So I was always, I think I spent 3 years just casting or looking for situations and would have my equipment and yeah.
So you went through quite a bit in early reflections and all kinds of other emotions as a female. Do you think there are differences between for somebody who's male going through what you probably went through and how they might be different?
So I interviewed and talked to so many people. I think not a whole lot, but I think that our society is more open to men kind of recoupling, remarrying, I think it's easier as a man. I think it still is today. It definitely was then. I had a friend, we were both widowed at the same time. His wife actually found his next wife, and he was married within 6 months before she died. So I think it's not that that's the norm, but I think it's more acceptable. So I think those things are a little different in our society. But I think this is about loss too. And I think loss is hard for all of us. And I think what I want my project to be is just about embracing that liminal time. And again, we're all aging. That's another one, like embrace it and just play with it. It is what it is. We can't change it. And then how do we grow from it? Because we're wiser. And then how do we take it? So hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, I just think that it is equally hard.
And I don't, yeah, I'm not a man. So, but when I do talk to other men, they say they definitely resonates with them as well.
So I'm aware of graphic novels, but I don't think I've ever seen a graphic autobiography before. And the fact that you did it with photographs rather than drawing really speaks to me because I use camera also. You started with Woodstock,
Mm-hmm.
and that put me in mind of Joni Mitchell, who wasn't there but wrote the song. And I'm looking at what you've done, which is so self-revelatory, much like her music.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you have anything to say about putting yourself on page in front of the public in the way you've done.
I am going to work on a movie. My next thing is to do some film with this. So
Same.
is that on this project? Yeah. Is to take it bring it alive even more that way. If that makes sense. Is that
You have to push to put your emotions in front of people. Were you driven to tell the story in some way?
that's where it wouldn't work if I had a model. I would see a situation and it came from in here. But it was weird because you're setting up as a photographer, you've got 10 seconds to jump in the scene and feel that, like where I'm laying there in the red dress on that chair, literally going back and forth, watching the light, and it's like, but it just, most of it, I just let it happen. It was organic. It was organic.
So same
You
thing,
know?
you're gonna jump into the scene.
You want me to pull out? Is that telling me to be quiet now? To pull, but it was fun. But it didn't work with models, because then I'd be like, oh, okay, be sad or feel this, whatever, or feel. It was because they were real feelings. Yeah.
Do one or two more. Wait,
Going back to the first part of your talk, where showing pictures from your international trip, you took lots of pictures of people. When you had your farm workers things, you talked about having great contact with. What kind of contact did you have with people in India?
I think it was similar because I didn't speak the language, but I've always been one that can just drift off and with I don't know, just eyes and warm smile and can start, connect. It's connection.
Like the drummer.
Oh, yeah.
Following you around. Did he know you were following?
We kind of did, and then we just played, and, I kind of like, till he got comfortable with me and he kind of ignored me. And yeah, but I love that dance. I love people. I love connecting in that dance. The little boys, they knew, they loved it, so I love, because I don't want to take a picture. I like when I do, but I like when we can dance.
Yeah.
And a lot of that communication, I think, is universal with smiles and just energy.
Do you think you lost that in the farm worker project where you had formal introduction? You could still.
Yeah, that's why the language, I didn't get nuances about people's history, like they've been here 10 years, things like that, but I definitely knew how they felt, and they would, enough vocabulary, like pride would come through, and, so yeah, there's still so much, I think, from gestures that you can pick up. Yeah.
one more. Go ahead.
I guess you kind of asked the same question that I want to ask, so thank you for that. But I guess on top of that one, how were you able to, I guess, just navigate foreign countries in general without knowing the common language, even like, I guess beyond just like individual characters, but like getting food, things like that.
So for the most part, I've gone with groups, small little groups, because it's nice to have a fixer. And you just get in deeper, you get to the right place at the right time, and then they kind of let you go. And so I've always had that support system, which is helpful. But I'm also not afraid just to, I'll see you in 4 hours, because so it's nice to kind of have a safety net, but then go. Like Kumela was crazy. I mean, that literally was, and I saw a friend of mine, she got run over. There was a stampede and broke her arm and ripped something, or urine, or blood everywhere. And it wasn't because anybody was being mean or anything. It was just, a horse reared or an elephant reared, and then the whole crowd went, and she got trampled on. So, I mean, yeah, those things happen.
Okay, I'm gonna take MC privilege here.
Sure.
To ask you one last question.
Sure.
So your sons in this story, can you talk about that a bit?
So part of it was the guilt and the shame, because I was a mother with 2 young children. And it was interesting. I was doing it when I first started doing the project. I never showed them anything, and as I started getting traction on it, started showing up places. They're like, "What is that? Like, what are you doing?" And then I'm like, "Wait a minute, you're 30. Let's talk about this." And all of a sudden, they're like, "You do need to do this project. That's important." Because then I got a book deal, and I was doing a book, and this was perfect for a book because it's a story. And they're like, "Oh, you can do the travel ones, aren't you?" I said, "No, I'm doing this." I go, "Why are you doing that? Do India." But then actually I gave a presentation a couple weeks ago and both kids were there. And I never would put anything with print without them reading. And also my partner, David, made sure they knew what I was saying and, what I was showing. So, they knew it, but it was great because both my kids were there just beaming. And and they're adults now and they're like, okay, I get it, Yeah. So it was, but again, that kind of reaffirmed that I should be doing it.
Thank you very much.